Hi, my name is Jacob. I never imagined my life would change in an instant. One moment, I was living a peaceful, ordinary day as a rabbi, surrounded by family, faith, and my community. The next, I was gone, crossing a threshold I never expected to return from. What I saw beyond death was both terrifying and inspiring. I was shown truths no one had ever prepared me for, visions of judgment, redemption, and the weight of every action I had ever taken. I must share this with you because what awaits us beyond this life is far more real than we can ever comprehend. It was an ordinary morning like any other. I woke up early, as I always did, with the first light of dawn filtering through my bedroom window. The air smelled of fresh coffee, and my wife was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. I had a full day ahead: prayers, meetings, and a Torah study session with students who relied on me for spiritual guidance. Life felt normal, predictable, safe. At breakfast, my grandchildren ran around laughing as they played with their toys. I smiled, watching them, thinking how blessed I was. My wife placed a cup of tea in front of me, shaking her head. "David, you work too much," she said with that knowing look. "You need to rest." I laughed. "I'll rest when I'm old," I joked. I had no idea those were some of the last words I would say before everything changed. The day unfolded as expected: prayers at the synagogue, deep discussions with students, and comforting those who sought my counsel. But as evening fell, a strange feeling settled in my chest. I dismissed it as exhaustion, pushing forward as I always did. Dinner was lively. My family gathered around the table, sharing stories, laughing. But just as I reached for my glass of water, the world around me blurred. A sudden crushing pain spread across my chest. The voices around me faded. I felt weightless, detached from my body. Then, nothing. I didn't feel fear at first. It was more like confusion. One moment, I was surrounded by my family, and the next, I was somewhere else. It was strange, like I was floating, but also standing still. My body lay on the floor, my wife screaming my name, my son dialing for help, but I wasn't there anymore. I should have panicked, but I didn't. A strange calm washed over me. I tried to speak, to tell them I was okay, but no sound came out. Instead, I felt something pulling me, as if invisible hands were guiding me away. Then, a force strong and undeniable swept me into a tunnel, a vast space stretching into infinity. It was dark, yet not frightening. Ahead, a soft glow pulsed like a heartbeat, drawing me forward. The air, if I could call it that, carried a strange energy, thick with something beyond words. Then I heard voices, not human, not earthly. They whispered, calling my name in a language I didn't recognize, but understood perfectly. "You are not alone." The tunnel stretched endlessly, and yet I was moving fast, drawn toward the unknown. The warmth of life was gone. There was no pain, no heartbeat, just existence. And then I reached the light. The moment I entered the light, everything changed. It was overwhelming, not just in brightness, but in feeling. It wasn't simply light, it was a light. It pulsed, shifting in colors I had never seen before. I was no longer in my body, yet I had never felt more aware. I wasn't alone. Figures stood before me, their presence neither welcoming nor hostile. They were tall, radiant, their features undefined yet familiar. I couldn't see their faces, but I knew they saw every part of me: my thoughts, my regrets, my sins. Everything was exposed. One of them stepped forward. I felt his gaze pierce through my very soul. "David, you are here before your time." His voice wasn't heard, it was felt, resonating inside me. I tried to speak, to ask where I was, but no words formed. Then my life unfolded before me, not in flashes, but in experience. I felt every moment again, the joy, the pain, the kindness, the mistakes. I felt the way I had made others feel every harsh word, every moment of indifference, every opportunity to show love that I had ignored. It hit me like a tidal wave. I had always believed in heaven, in God's judgment, in righteousness, but nothing had prepared me for this. And then I saw them, the shadows lurking beyond the light. As I stood in the presence of those beings, feeling the weight of my life's actions, I became aware of something else. The light, though powerful, was not alone. Shadows lurked at its edges, shifting, waiting. I felt a chill. The beings in the light did not move toward the darkness, nor did they acknowledge it, but I could feel the presence of something terrifying, something that had been watching me all along. Then I heard them voices, but not like the ones that had greeted me. These voices carried agony, regret, endless longing. They called out, not to the beings of light, but to me. "David, help us." I turned, and my heart, if I still had one, shattered. There, just beyond the reach of the light, were souls countless, wandering, trapped. Their faces were contorted in pain, their hands reaching, their eyes filled with sorrow. Some, I recognized a childhood friend who had taken his own life, a man from my congregation who had lived in selfishness, never believing in an afterlife. They were stuck. They could see the light, but they couldn't reach it. Why? I thought, because they never sought it in life. A voice answered inside me. Terror gripped me. I had always believed in divine mercy, but I never understood its counterpart, divine justice. And now, I was standing in the balance between the two. Then something moved in the darkness, and I knew, without being told, that not all of them would ever escape. I turned back toward the light, shaken by what I had seen, the lost souls, the endless suffering, the shadows. They were all too real. My mind screamed for understanding. Was this the afterlife? Was I being judged? The figures in the light stepped forward, forming a circle around me. I could not see their faces, but I felt their presence wise, ancient, beyond human comprehension. They were not just angels or spirits, they were something more, something divine. I tried to speak, but before I could, one of them raised his hand. "You stand before the council. Here, truth is revealed. No deception, no illusions, only what is." I felt the weight of his words settle over me like a blanket of fire. My very soul trembled. "You have lived with faith," another being said. "But faith is not enough. Tell us, what have you learned in your time on earth?" I opened my mouth, but hesitated. What had I learned? I had studied the Torah, led my congregation, guided my family in righteousness. But here, in this place of absolute truth, I felt small. "I have tried to be a good man," I finally whispered. "Trying is not enough," a third voice said. "What of your heart? Did you truly live with love? Did you serve without pride? Did you seek truth beyond words?" I felt a crushing weight on my soul. Had I? Or had I been so consumed with knowledge that I forgot wisdom, so devoted to ritual that I forgot compassion? The council did not accuse me. They only waited. They knew. And deep inside, I realized I was not as righteous as I had believed. Without warning, a massive book appeared before me, floating in the air. Its pages shimmered, golden light pulsating from within. I knew immediately what it was, the book of life. The records of my existence lay before me, every moment I had lived, written in divine script. The pages turned on their own, revealing my past, not as I had remembered it, but as it truly was. I watched my childhood, my first prayers, the mistakes of my youth. I saw myself as a young rabbi, full of passion, but also pride. Every sermon I had given, every word I had spoken in God's name, some had uplifted, but others had unknowingly wounded. I saw the moments I had dismissed someone in need, the opportunities for kindness I had ignored. Even my smallest thoughts, the ones I believed no one had known, were recorded here. I trembled. How can any soul be worthy? I thought. One of the beings spoke. No one is without fault, but what matters is what you do with the truth. Will you change or will you deny? Tears filled my eyes. I had spent my life believing I understood righteousness, but now I knew I had only scratched the surface. The light shifted, and I was drawn back toward the shadows. The lost souls still lingered, their eyes filled with silent pleas. But this time, I saw more. Some were trapped in endless loops, reliving the worst moments of their lives. A man knelt on the ground, whispering apologies that no one heard. A woman wept, her hands reaching for something unseen. Who are they? I asked. Those who rejected truth in life. Those who chose pride over humility, greed over love. Now, they are bound by their own choices. I shuddered. I had always believed in repentance, in mercy, but now I saw the other side, the side no one speaks of. Then my breath caught. Among them, I recognized a face. It was a former friend, someone I had known well. He had been a scholar, respected, wise, but he had always doubted, always questioned, not to seek truth, but to disprove it. Why is he here? I whispered. He never sought the light. He believed only in himself, and so he stands alone. A crushing realization settled over me. We are given free will, but in the end, our choices bind us. Some chains we forge ourselves. The light swirled, and suddenly I was no longer in the afterlife. I was looking down at the earth, but not as I had left it. The world was changing. I saw war, division, hatred spreading like a plague. People turning against each other, blinded by pride and selfishness. Faith was fading, replaced by empty pursuits. But then I saw something else among the chaos. There were lights. Small at first, but growing. People who still sought truth, souls who still loved, who still served. The future is not yet written, a voice whispered. But time is short. If mankind does not awaken, the darkness will grow. I wanted to scream, to warn them. What must I do? I asked. The being turned to me, his voice final. You will return and you will tell them. But whether they listen is not up to you. A great force pulled at me. The light faded, and I fell back into my body. Just as I felt myself being pulled away from the light and back toward my body, another presence appeared, a being unlike the others. This one radiated something deeper, something I can only describe as the purest form of love and power. It wasn't like the council that had questioned me. This presence felt personal, intimate. It knew me. You are loved, it said. Even in your failings, you are loved. I felt a warmth I had never known before, a peace so overwhelming that I wanted to stay. But you cannot remain here. There is more work to be done. 1,000 questions flooded my mind. Why me? Why show me this? What am I supposed to do? The being simply placed a hand on my shoulder. You will know. But remember this, there is still time, but not much. The world stands at a threshold. It must choose, and so must you. The moment those words settled in my soul, I felt the pull grow stronger. The peace, the warmth, the love, it was slipping away. I wanted to fight it, to stay in that presence forever, but the choice was not mine to make. The next thing I knew, I was falling. The descent was sudden, forceful. I felt my soul being dragged back toward earth, away from the divine, back into the fragile shell of my human body. Before everything faded, I heard one final message. Tell them, warn them. The time is short, but not yet gone. Then everything went black. I gasped, my lungs burning as air rushed into them. My chest ached, as if I had been crushed under an immense weight. Bright lights flooded my vision, and then voices shouting, crying, calling my name. I was back. Doctors surrounded me, their faces filled with shock. Machines beeped, hands pressed against my chest. My wife sobbed in the corner. I blinked, confused. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination? But no. I knew. Every part of me knew. I had seen the truth, and I had returned with a mission. Recovering from death was unlike anything I had ever experienced. My body felt foreign, as if it no longer belonged to me. I could still feel the weight of what I had seen, the echoes of voices, the pull of both light and darkness. I spent days in the hospital, barely speaking. The doctors called it a miracle. I had no heartbeat for several minutes, yet here I was, alive. My wife held my hand, searching my face. "David," she whispered, "what happened?" I wanted to tell her everything, but how could I explain something so vast, so terrifying, so real? I tried. The words stumbled out about the council, the book of life, the lost souls. But the moment I spoke of the darkness, of the warning I had received, I saw fear in her eyes. She nodded, but said nothing. The truth was, I barely understood it myself. How do you return to ordinary life after seeing eternity? The first night after my return was the hardest. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, the souls in torment, the light that had judged me, the angel that had warned me. I turned in my hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. Maybe I wasn't perfect. I had spent my life studying scripture, teaching righteousness, yet even I had fallen short. I had been blind to so many things. And now I had a choice. I could dismiss it as a hallucination, a trick of the mind. I could go back to my old life, pretend that nothing had happened. Or I could obey. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer, but this time it was different. I didn't pray for healing or strength. I prayed for courage, because I knew whatever came next, I had to speak. Even if no one believed me, even if they thought I was mad, the world had to know. Time was running out. The day I was discharged from the hospital, everything felt different. The world looked the same, the trees outside the window, the sound of cars honking, the familiar scent of home. But I was not the same. I could still feel the weight of the experience pressing on me, as if I had brought a piece of the afterlife back with me. Every moment I had lived was clearer now, as if the book of life was still open before my eyes. I could not ignore what I had seen: the divine counsel, the lost souls, the terrifying warnings. When I returned to the synagogue, people greeted me with warmth and relief. They saw my survival as a miracle, but they didn't know the real miracle, the second chance I had been given. I stood before my congregation for the first time since my return. My voice trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer responsibility of the truth I had been entrusted with. "I have been to the other side," I finally said, "and I have returned to tell you that everything we believe it is real. The good, the evil, the judgment, the mercy. I saw it all." Some people nodded in reverence. Others looked confused. A few whispered among themselves. But I knew the truth, and I could not stay silent. I spent weeks trying to put my experience into words. Every night, I relived the moments, the council's piercing gaze, the weight of my life's deeds, the wails of the lost souls. Some of my closest friends dismissed it. "It was a dream, Rabbi," one said, "a side effect of your condition." But I knew better. "I saw what happens when we live only for ourselves," I told them. "I saw what awaits those who never seek the light, those who deny the truth, those who believe that death is the end. And I knew, if I stayed silent, I would be as guilty as those souls who never sought redemption." One evening, I gathered my family, my wife, my children, even my grandchildren. I told them everything. There was silence when I finished. Then my elder son, usually a skeptic, looked at me with something I had never seen before: fear. "So what do we do?" he finally asked. I exhaled. "We live with love, with truth, with urgency, because time is running out." The world would continue doubting. People would continue living as if they had all the time in the world. But I had seen the truth, and the truth could not be ignored. I do not know why I was given this experience. I am no greater than any other man. I have made mistakes, lived with pride, failed to see the full picture, what it means to be truly righteous. But I know this. I was sent back for a reason, and that reason is you. You who are listening to this story. You who are searching for answers. You who wonder if there is something more beyond this life. I am here to tell you, there is. And it is far greater than anything we can imagine. There is light, but there is also darkness. There is mercy, but there is also judgment. There is love, but there is also consequence. The afterlife is real, and what we do here in this life matters. Seek truth. Live with love. Because when your time comes, you will not stand before men. You will stand before the truth itself. And in that moment, there will be no more lies, no more excuses, only what is. I was sent back to warn you. Now, the choice is yours. After sharing my experience with my family and congregation, I felt both relief and an unbearable burden. I had done what I was told. I had spoken. But had they truly heard me? Many listened with reverence, nodding in agreement. Some even wept, feeling the depth of my words. But others, even those close to me, looked uncertain. Rabbi, what if it was just a near-death hallucination? One of my students asked. You were unconscious. The brain plays tricks when it's deprived of oxygen. Another rationalized their skepticism. Didn't anger me, it terrified me. Because I knew they were wrong. I'd felt the presence of something greater than human understanding. I had stood before beings that saw my soul naked, without pretense. I had witnessed realms so vast and terrifying that no hallucination could create them. But how could I make them believe? I was not a prophet. I was not a saint. I was a man who'd been given a second chance. For days, I struggled with doubt. I had been shown visions of the future, warnings that the world was standing on the edge of something irreversible. But if no one listened, what was the point? Then one night, as I sat in my study, staring at my reflection in the darkened window, I heard a voice not in my ears, but deep within my soul. Your task is not to make them believe. Your task is only to tell them. The rest is up to them. I exhaled slowly. The truth is, we all have a choice. Some will hear and change. Others will dismiss and continue as before. But when the time comes, when they stand before the truth themselves, they will remember. And by then, there will be no more time to prepare. In the weeks that followed, strange things began to happen. It was as if, after returning from the afterlife, I had become aware of things that had always been there, but I had never noticed before. I would wake up in the middle of the night, feeling an unseen presence watching over me. Sometimes it was comforting, other times it sent chills through my body. Shadows in the corner of my vision would shift, only to disappear when I turned to look. At first, I dismissed them as paranoia, but then one evening, I felt something stronger. I was writing in my journal, documenting everything I had experienced, when suddenly the room grew cold. The hairs on my arms stood on end. My breath turned shallow. Something was there. And then, a whisper, not in words, but in pure sensation, ran through my bones. Do not speak of this. I gripped the pen tighter. It was then that I realized there were forces that did not want this message shared. Darkness does not like to be exposed. It thrives in silence, in doubt, in secrecy. And that's when I knew I had to keep speaking no matter what tried to stop me. I do not tell my story to frighten you. I do not share this to glorify myself or to make you believe in me. I share this because the world is asleep. We are distracted by money, by power, by the temporary pleasures of this life. We live as if death is far away, as if we have all the time in the world. But time is an illusion. And when your moment comes, when you take your last breath, you will know. You will remember every choice you made, every act of kindness, every moment of selfishness. And you will stand before the truth, unable to run, unable to hide. So I ask you, what will you do with the time you have left? Will you live as if none of this matters? Or will you awaken? Because the truth is coming for all of us. And once you see it, there is no turning back. Sharing my experience was not easy. Many people dismissed it outright. Some called it a hallucination, a near-death delusion. Others listened, but treated it like an interesting story, something to be entertained by, but not taken seriously. The hardest part was the silence from those I respected fellow scholars, rabbis, people of deep faith. They were the ones who turned away the fastest. "You were unconscious, David," one rabbi told me. "What you saw was simply your brain trying to make sense of dying." But how could I explain that it was more real than life itself? That the things I had seen, the truths I had learned, were beyond anything my mind could create. I felt alone in a way I had never felt before. I had returned from the afterlife with a message, but few wanted to hear it. Yet I knew I couldn't stop. I had been given a second chance for a reason. And if only one person listened, if only one soul was saved from the fate I had witnessed, it would be worth it. So I spoke. And I would continue speaking, no matter how many turned away. Something unexpected began happening in the weeks that followed. A young man from my congregation, who had always been distant, approached me after one of my sermons. His hands trembled as he spoke. "Rabbi, I haven't prayed in years," he admitted. "But after hearing what you saw, I feel something, like I need to make things right." A woman, one of the strongest skeptics I knew, called me in the middle of the night. Her voice was shaking. "I had a dream about the souls you described," she said. "I can't stop thinking about them. What if I'm on the wrong path?" People were listening. Not all, not many, but some, and that was enough. The shift was small, but it was real. I began seeing it everywhere, people questioning, searching, wanting to understand. It was as if something deep inside them had been waiting for this moment, for this truth. And I realized, perhaps I wasn't as alone as I thought. One evening, as I prepared for another sermon, I felt a deep unease settle over me. A weight pressed against my chest, but not like before. This was different. I sat in silence, trying to understand, and then a thought, one that I knew wasn't my own, rose within me. They will try to silence you. Fear gripped me. Would people turn against me? Would I be cast out of my own faith community? That night, I had a dream. I was standing in the tunnel again, but this time, I was not alone. The lost souls were there, watching me, their eyes filled with something new, hope. One of them reached forward, whispering, "Don't stop." I woke up with tears in my eyes. No matter what happened next, I could not stop. I had thought my experience was a warning for myself alone, a private revelation. But I understood now, it was a warning for everyone. People are living as if time is endless, as if death is something distant, something to worry about later. But the truth is, none of us know when our time will come. Some will be ready. Most will not. I had been sent back to tell the world, wake up, seek truth. Do not waste your time on things that do not matter. I began speaking more boldly, writing down everything I remembered, making sure that even if my voice was ignored, the message would not be lost. And slowly, people did listen, because deep inside, they knew the truth already. They had just been afraid to face it. If you are hearing this, if you are listening to my words, I beg you, do not ignore them. You may think you have time. You may believe that life will always give you another chance. But one day, your breath will stop, your heart will fail, and you will stand before the truth. And in that moment, there will be no excuse, no second chances, only what you have done and what you have not done. I was given the rarest of gifts, a glimpse beyond the veil, a chance to return and warn those still alive. You may not believe me. That is your choice. But know this, every choice matters. Every moment counts. And eternity is real. Live with love. Live with truth. Live with urgency. Because one day, your time will run out. And when that day comes, will you be ready? The choice is yours.